Hi folks, and welcome to another episode of Exade Replay, coming at you with episode 33 of the series. Let's get right into it. So here we are in the series now having to deal with things post-Kronos, now that we've seen that Masamune Dan has revealed himself to be wielding the power of Kamen Rider Kronos. Thankfully this week we don't get to talk about anything changing in the opening, it's just as it was last week, so we can go ahead and move on with what actually happened in the episode. Now to start off with, we see that the rest of the people in the CR are trying to catch Hiro's dad up on everything that's happened, since apparently he hasn't been paying attention. Maybe because he's been playing Kamen Rider Chronicle, who knows. Point being, they're getting him up to date on everything that's happened, considering that Masamune Dan has revealed himself to be out of prison and now terrorizing everybody there in the CR. But we also see in very short order that Masamune Dan not only is a threat to everybody in the CR, he's being a dick to everybody, including the Bugsters. Not only does he just show up in the Bugster compound unannounced, he brings them a fruit basket showing, oh yeah, sorry about Lovelyka, that was on me, my bad. He further impresses upon them that everybody in Kamen Rider Chronicle, not just the Bugsters, but also the Kamen Riders, are viewed as products of his company, of the Genmu Corporation, and as such, it's his job to oversee how things go, good or bad, it's all for the good of the company. We see him further impress this idea of how he views the world through Kamen Rider Chronicle in the first fight we have there in the episode. We see that there's a ride player trying to beat Kamen Rider Chronicle, but when Kronos steps in, he tells everybody that Kamen Rider Chronicle is for the ride players, the players of the game, not for the NPCs, who he views as both the Bugsters and the Kamen Riders. Really, he sees things more compactly than Kuroto Dan ever did. And as such, that pisses off Kuroto Dan, because in his mind, and he says this later on in the episode, well, this is my game, I created it, you shouldn't be able to have as much say over it as you do. But the thing of it is, looking at it from a company structure, you're the creator, I employ you, I understand what exactly it takes to make this game succeed, so I'll let you do whatever you want so long as it attributes to my success. That's why I let you get me in trouble. I let myself take the fall all those years ago for those crimes because I knew this would attribute to the success of the eventuality of Kamen Rider Chronicle being released. Wow. Now you would think that it would be very easy for everyone to side against Masamune. He seems to understand this, which is why he realizes he needs a right-hand man. So in that first fight, he pulls Hiro away using Pause to give him an offer that he can't refuse. Now aside from Hiro having been made an offer off to the side, Emu decides that it's best for him to make a plea to Masamune's humanity, and he does this by going to the office. The interesting thing about this office is that you might recognize it from another Kamen Rider series. It seems that Masamune's office is actually Kogami's office from Kamen Rider O's. In terms of personality, we see during this conversation with Masamune and Emu that there is a lot of like father, like son sort of mentality here, whereas whenever you would challenge Kuroto about his worldview, about him being the game master, he would blow up. It's kind of similar there with Masamune, except he's a lot more calm about it, but he's not having any of this challenging, especially when he displays just how much power he has over Kamen Rider Chronicle. Thanks to what he calls the Kamen Rider Chronicle Master Gashot, he apparently has the power to delete Bugsters from the field at whim, and they can be fully deleted until he feels good and ready to bring them back into the game. So for the time being, he decides to display this power by deleting Salty from the game right in front of Palad and Graphite. And for the foreseeable future, Salty is pretty much dead. Now, I'll probably end up talking about this a bit more when we get to the end of this episode, and of course going into next week's episode, but now I'm starting to think that certain things about the show are starting to get a little bit cheap, and mainly that's the idea of death not being permanent. Of course now we're dealing with these ideas that you can bring somebody back so long as you have the data stored in the Proto-Gashot from the Bugster that defeated them. That's one thing. But then with the Bugsters too, even if they can't die permanently, of course we saw that with Graphite, we thought he was dead, he got his flowers, his actor received them, and then he's back a couple of episodes later. That really weakens the strength of the plot, how much it can actually affect the audience. I make this comparison to Kamen Rider Gaim from a few years ago. The use of Takatora's death there in this series was very well utilized as far as pushing Mitsuzane forward and his development as a character, but then when you back away from that towards the end and then the subsequent movies, it cheapens the effect that he had. If that death had still weighed on Mitsuzane's conscience, then yeah, that would have been something to carry him forward and would have made him more redeemable, at least in my opinion. But here, if nothing's ever really gone, if no one ever really dies because the data is stored, then I don't know how much lasting punch that's gonna have. Yeah, you'll get a cheap thrill for that week, but if somebody's just gonna come back, then you're not so worried about them. Now, all that aside, there is a very major problem here, and it's the fact that Kronos is technically OP. He's overpowered because of the power of Pause, which we covered in the last video. So the CR has to come up with a way to defeat it. And as such, they actually do come up with a pretty legitimate plan that would work. So the plan is to to have Masamune turn into Kronos and then destroy, seemingly, Shin Kuroto Dan, have him turn into a bugster, embody himself into the bug visor's Vi, and then come out while he uses paws on somebody else. And then at that point, basically pull a Piccolo from Dragon Ball Z, and then have Emu go ahead and smash through him or reprogram him. Either way, that makes a lot of sense. The unfortunate part is that maybe you could have seen this coming if you saw Hiro's reaction to Emu's conversation earlier on in the episode, but Hiro decided to go ahead and take up Masamune on his offer. Reason being is that Masamune holds all the cards, or in this case all the Gashots. He shows that he's the person who has those proto-Gashots that are missing from the Ministry of Health, and he happens to have the exact one he needs to bring Saki back to life. Now I do think it's worth noting that Taiga seems to have figured this out early on because he was the first one to notice, hey, Hiro's not on the field anymore, where is he? And then of course you have him there thinking it over the course of the episode, and then you see Saiba Niko in the corner doing Senchan's thinking pose from Dekaranger, nice little reference there, Toei, but at the same time, he didn't tell anybody what he thought he could have found out. He could have saved everybody a whole lot of trouble like, hey, Hiro could potentially turn on us, he has a very good reason for this, but he didn't say a word. That doesn't exactly keep up with his character being better and better motivated, but you know what, whatever, we need somebody to provide more drama for the show to continue. Now the whole time this has been happening, let's not forget about the bugsters here. Paulout and Graphite are kinda scared and pissed off at the same time, with good reason. They just saw Lovelika die last episode, and then Salty died for no reason this episode. So we're seeing that they're trying to work through this. You know, we want to fight the humans, but at the same time, Kronos is a problem. So what exactly do we do with this? Now for the duration of this episode, they sit it out. There's really nothing they can do. But going into next episode, it seems that they're going to try and develop a plan to see how they deal with this new threat. And speaking of the next episode, we're of course going to see more of Hiro's motivation, more of what it takes for him to get what he wants to achieve, which is of course bringing his girlfriend back. And then nothing else of any sort of importance will happen next week on the episode, except Kiria is back from the dead! Sorry. Point being, that's going to be a lot to chew next week, but let's go ahead and talk about what happened in this week's episode. So, first off, Kuroto Dan's plan. He says that he wants to distribute Kamen Rider Chronicle worldwide. So what do you guys think of this plan? Do you think it's a good plan to distribute this game that could potentially kill people, or is it kind of cheap? The second thing I want to address is, of course, Niko and Poppy. So you'll see for the last couple of weeks, they haven't been combatants in the fights at all. So do you think we've seen the last of Ride Player Niko and Kamen Rider Poppy, or will they eventually bring them back into the fold? And thirdly, the bugsters. So we see that Graphite and Paula didn't quite know what to do this week. So going into these next episodes, do you think they'll go ahead and try and fight Kronos on their own, or will they form a temporary alliance with the Kamen Riders? You guys tell me in the comments below. And of course, during the week, you guys can always talk to me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 33 of Exade Replay for episode 33 of the series, Company Restructuring. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next week.